So how would you mind the gap? If you're unlocked, you won't be able to mind the gap. The gap will be minding you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kirsten Davidson, your host and creator of my wellness podcast, Mind the Gaps, where we work on surrendering our typical ways of looking at life to step out of our comfort zone and into our growth zone. I'm so excited to introduce you to episode 31, Kobe and MJ's Mindfulness Coach, where I'm joined by our guest, George Mumford. George is a globally recognized speaker, teacher, and coach. Since 1989, he's been honing his groundbreaking performance and mindfulness techniques with people from locker rooms to boardrooms, from Yale to jail. While at the University of Massachusetts, where he roomed with future Hall of Famer Julius Erving, injuries forced Mumford out of basketball and into addiction to pain medication and drugs. With the help of meditation and mindfulness, he got clean and made it his mission to teach and work with others. Mumford's first book, The Mindful Athlete: Secrets to Pure Performance, is a memoir and instruction guide to accessing your inner masterpiece. His latest book was published in May 2023, Unlocked: Embrace Your Greatness, Find the Flow, Discover Success. This time last year, Unlocked showed up in my mailbox thanks to my dear friend and Paralympic champion, Austin Smink. The book had first been gifted to him by his fiancée and my close childhood friend, Celine. Before leaving to win gold and bronze at the 2024 Paralympic Games, Austin passed along his well-loved, note-filled copy of this book to me. I later shared a photo of Unlocked on Instagram, tagged George Mumford, and to my amazement, he replied. The rest is history, and now George is a guest on the Mind the Gaps podcast. You can find George on Instagram at george.mumford, through Twitter at jtmumford, through his website at georgemumford.com, and by his first and last name on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. For all things Mind the Gaps, you can find me on Instagram at kirsten.davidson and through my new website, mindthegaps.co. If you like what you hear today, taking a moment to rate and review the podcast episode is always greatly appreciated. We couldn't do this without your support, so thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy.
So to mind the gaps. Okay, so what is the gap? If I may ask you.
Yeah, of
That
course.
the space between, what is it?
I'm curious what you were going to say. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it.
The gap is where freedom lies. The
Mm-hmm.
space between stimulus and response.
Yeah.
Our ability to contemplate the next move instead of just making the next move. Although
Mhm.
sometimes spontaneity is helpful, but at the same time, it's got to be driven by some intention. It's always driven by an intention, whether it's conscious or unconscious is another matter. But there's always an intention.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I mean, you're spot on because the gap is that space between, you say, stillness and action, and the gap is freedom. So the way I
Yes.
define the gap is I use the metaphor in the UK, Mind the Gap, subway station platform, that space between the platform and the train, and the platform is your comfort zone and the train is your growth zone. And I loved how in your book you use that term a lot, this growth zone. So that really
Yes.
resonated with me as well. And that gap is that decision to take action. So I love how you call it freedom.
Oh, so I love that.
Thank you.
I love that. Yes.
So your book Unlocked revolves around the idea of freeing the divine spark within us. Could you share with listeners what it truly means to be unlocked and what that divine spark means to you?
Yes. So the process that I talk about in the book that helps you unlock is this ability to embrace your greatness and then to find the flow and discover success. So unlock means being spontaneous, being of one's own will, being able to meet the moment in a way where all the things that hinder our ability to be present, to be vulnerable, to be willing to embrace whatever comes up, saying
Mm,
yes to it, and generating hope, knowing that you have to mind the gap, that you always have a choice. So the
hmm.
freedom is, to be unlocked is to be able to be spontaneous, to
Right.
meet the moment in new and fresh ways without a preconceived. One of my at home with George this week, I talked about this idea of listening, deep listening, or listening to someone without an agenda,
Hmm.
without trying to answer the question before before you know the question.
Hmm.
So it's really about just being able to be extremely vulnerable to the unknown unfolding moment, and at the same time of 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 having the awareness, having the understanding of what's going on, being able to respond from your masterpiece within that quiet, still place inside of you that knows, that still small voice we refer to. But we have this tremendous capacity within us for being able to meet the moment with compassion, with joy, with understanding that the main thing is this moment.
Yeah. I love that. The masterpiece within. It reminds me of what you mentioned in your book about the inner game
Yeah.
versus the outer game. Can you talk more about that and maybe how that's related
Yes.
to your work with some of the greats?
Yes. So it goes back. I mean, I go across all the traditions we create with the word. Your attention follows your intention. And it's this idea of self awareness. We have this ability to observe ourselves, to observe the body, mind, heart, and soul, to be able to relate to things in a way where we're seeing things in new and fresh ways. And in that seeing, there's a there's an ability based on what our core values are, based on how we see the world. Um, that is very important. That we meet what we mirror. So
Hmm.
whatever is going on out there is a reflection in here. So we put so much pressure out here that we don't understand that we see experience through filters. And the main two filters I like to refer to is if you're in survival mode, where you're in a fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, because that's a reptilian brain. And what that does is it scans the horizon for danger. So 9 out of 10 thoughts are going to be negative. And
Hmm.
so when we're in survival mode, that means we're just trying to survive, fight, flee, forage, reproduce, whatever. So that's the reptilian brain. That's just survival. And need to understand that on a cellular level, the cell is either in survival mode or growth mode. Growth mode is the inquisitive mode that says, okay, what's the lesson? What's going on here? And based on what's going on here, how do I want to respond to it? Make a choice.
Hmm.
What's the choice I want to make to it? Understanding that habits, we have these habits, these tendencies of mind. But the most important thing is to understand that the lens in which we are observing experience, our view, and
Hmm.
so if you're in survival mode, you're going to be reactive and you're going to be worrying about threats. If you're in growth mode, then you're open and your idea is to seek to understand.
Hmm.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense? And so when you're in it's like so how would you mind the gap? If you're unlocked, you won't be able to mind the gap. The gap will be minding you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's it. So to be unlocked means to be open to the possibility of the unfolding, unlimited possibility of the moment,
Hmm.
with the idea of not just observing self-awareness, but self-regulating, being able to regulate our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, how we interpret things, so that we're able to meet the moment as it is, uh, being able to honestly and fully express ourselves based on our
Hmm.
intention, based on who we say we're being.
Yeah.
And so that inquiry of understanding, how am I seeing things? Am I reacting? Am I responding? Am I in survival mode or am I in growth mode? Am I
Hmm.
focused on self or other? Is my mind at positive or negative? All of those things are really important because they determine how we perform, how we show up.
Right. And how have you seen that influence the athletes that you've worked with?
Before I put it in that context, it's really simple. You have to be in the moment and you have to honestly express yourself. That's what Bruce Lee said. Martial arts is to honestly express yourself. So that
Mhm.
means performance is having an intention and being able to execute it and execute it in a way where there's a level of satisfaction. There's a level of yes, I feel like I honestly express myself.
Mhm. So authenticity is really tied to that growth mindset for you.
Authenticity is more important than winning.
Mhm.
I would say authenticity is winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just being real because, as you know, it's the denial of suffering. It's the denial that life is difficult.
Mhm.
And M. Scott Peck, I'm going back to my original, back 41 years ago when I was reading The Road Less Traveled. And his book starts off with life is difficult. But if we accept the fact that life is difficult, life is no longer difficult.
Mhm. Mhm. It's amazing that you referenced that because probably 4 days ago, I picked up that book for the second time.
The secret to me, I read that book probably multiple times, and I just
Yeah.
came back around to it the last 6 months or so. Maybe it's been a year. It's hard to determine time because it just flies. But I
Mhm.
know I've been reflecting on it. It's another way of saying yes to life. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, man's search for meaning. He says he wrote a book called "Saying Yes to Life,"
Mm.
and it's basically the same thing. He says that ultimate freedom ultimate being unlocked is our ability to say yes to life, especially when we are experiencing unavoidable suffering. He says, when we find
Mm.
meaning in suffering, it ceases to be suffering. So for
Right.
me, people would ask me, why would I write about my substance abuse, about the difficult things in life, the challenges that I had? And it wasn't if it wasn't for those challenges, my latent abilities wouldn't have been able to express themselves. My masterpiece wouldn't have a reason and have a context from which to express itself, to actually
Mhm.
reveal and to meet the challenge. And so in some places, you know, they believe that, without difficulty, we don't get there. No struggle, no swag, no pressure, no diamonds. Is a
Mhm.
privilege. Once again, that's the self-regulation of interpreting, oh, this is an opportunity. It's not a mistake. When you make a mistake, it's an opportunity that unlocks you. When you
Mhm.
see a mistake as something bad shouldn't be happening and you're bad or you're not adequate, then we tend to withhold energy, withhold our ability to observe things and to respond to things. So something
Mm.
happens and we can say, oh, that's not true. And once you say it's not true, it doesn't get in. And you see people doubling down now and they don't take the facts. Are you going to believe your lying eyes or are you going to believe me? And so this idea of knowing the truth and being able to see things and be able to say, yes, whatever we can and understand and accept, then it's no longer suffering.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like when people are surprised by quote unquote bad things happening, unexpected things happening, things that they perceive as getting in the way, it feels like a surprise. I think we've all experienced that. It's like, well, this shouldn't be happening. So I love that reminder that no, it will happen. Guaranteed it will happen.
Yes, and that's the thing, accepting things as they are, saying yes to life, embracing it, then we can do something about it. Okay, I have a substance
Mhm.
abuse issue or I have chronic pain. If I don't accept it, I can't work with it. I can't do anything about it. But once
Right.
I accept it and then I ask the question in the growth mode, what's the lesson?
Mhm.
How can I transform this from a sin or something that shouldn't be happening to a blessing, to an opportunity? And
Mhm.
that energizes us. Instead of withdrawing and holding energy, we bring energy to it. We seek to understand, and then by
Mhm.
understanding it and accepting it, we realize that this is just part of life. But it's the other side of the coin. One side is suffering. The other side is the opposite of suffering: joy, peace, understanding. Uh,
Mhm.
love.
Yeah. And you've been open about your journey with addiction. Would you mind sharing with listeners, if you're comfortable, what that was like for you in terms of unlocking further aspects of yourself through that suffering, through that pain, and how it was a powerful opportunity for growth for you?
Yeah. So in my particular case, I'm very sensitive, and I would see things and I would feel things, and I didn't know how to deal with it. For instance, when I was younger, I'm talking about maybe 5, 6 years old. When somebody in the neighborhood moved, I was devastated. I would feel the loss. I'd walk on the street, and we call them homeless people now, but I'd see a wino on the street, and I felt sad for them. And so for me, so I was sensitive, and I was told, especially being a young boy, to stop being so sensitive. And so I closed myself in. I lived in this fantasy, and I was looking for relief from that
Mhm.
pain, and so from that emotional pain and whatnot. And so eventually it led to substance abuse, because I realized that from getting injured, that when I altered my consciousness, I had less inhibitions. I actually felt more connected instead of being in survival mode, trying to protect myself and not letting people know how I really felt. Because if I spoke up, I got beat up. It was a lot of that sort of stuff. But the reality was, I think my intention is that when we take substances and they alter our consciousness, we don't understand that we can do that without the substances.
Mhm.
We can do that just by the joy of discovery. It's all these neurochemicals are released when we are interested in something, when we are curious, when we seek to understand. Because the mind is interesting. When there's a riddle, it can't let go of that until it figures it out. And so if we can tap into this, for me, what I discovered was when I got clean that I had this need to be intellectually stimulated. And now I call it pursuing excellence and wisdom with grace and ease. And so for me, substance is just saying that I have a maladaptive process to be able to say yes to life, to be able to
Mm.
deal with the good, the bad, the ugly, and realizing that it's not so important what is happening out there. What's important is what's happening in here. My ability to say yes to it, and then understand it, and understand how I want to respond to it. The ultimate
Mhm.
freedom. I get to choose my attitude and the effort that I put into it, but also I have this opportunity to interpret it in ways where I feel more energetic, more empowered. And so some of the research, I feel like after these 41 years of my experience, coming up on 41 years next month, when the research is catching up. So there's research that says 90%, 90, not 10, but 90% of our long-term happiness is predicated on how the nervous system, the brain and the nervous system interprets experience.
Mm.
So here we go. Is that half empty or half full? Both are right. But if I see it as half full, then I'm in abundance, and I'm in growth mode. I'm seeking to
Mhm.
understand, to use my full potential to understand something, so that when I can accept it, it's no longer difficult and understand it. If I see it
Mhm.
the other way, I'm in growth. I'm in survival mode, and that is everything that's a threat has to be destroyed, denied, or dominated. So I'm in survival mode. I'm actually fighting for my life. But if I could take that fight energy and then channel that, like martial arts, to seek and to understand and to realize the basic premise is I have a masterpiece. I have everything I need to succeed. And if I don't like what's out there, I have the freedom and power to choose what's in here, because that's just a reflection. So Neville Goddard, it goes by the name of Neville. He's written a lot of books. One is Power versus Force, and in the jacket of one of his books, he says, "Leave the mirror alone and change your face."
I love
So
that.
what the heck does that mean, George? That means if you have a frown, if you're in the mirror, that's your business. That's on you. That's the inside game. If you change the frown, that's it. The mirror has nothing to do with it. The mirror is just
Mhm.
reflecting what's there. Another way of saying uncritical observation of our reactions, or to life. And if we
Mhm.
see that, and then when we realize that it takes 72 muscles to frown and only 13 to smile, then that's it. It's that simple. Just that smile totally changes the physiology, changes the psychology, changes our being. And so
Hmm.
we have to have this ability to know, how do I get out of the funk? How do I get out of survival mode and the growth mode? But we need survival mode. That is not to be put in abeyance and left on the back. No, we always need that reptilian brain. We need the emotional brain. We need the prefrontal cortex. We need the whole brain. It has to be unified. It has to be, in supportive of each other. So if I'm
Hmm.
walking across the street, I like to use this example, especially if I'm in Times Square or something, and a car is coming, or automobile is coming, or maybe it's somebody just moving really fast or on a bike or whatever. If I don't use my reptilian brain, I will sit there and contemplate, should I move? Instead of my reptilian brain moving me out of the way, probably in extraordinary speed and agility, because but we don't live in the same environment we lived in before, where just hearing a noise, a saber-toothed tiger or some other predator would be honest, if we're not on our toes and able to either fight or flee or maybe freeze, or whatever it is we need to do. And so we
Hmm.
need that. And so that knowing when to allow your instincts to take in, and because we're humans, we're not like animals. We don't know that we fly north or fly south in the winter or whatever, or if we're plants and we turn towards the sun. We don't have those abilities. So we have to make sure that whatever habit patterns, however we're programming ourselves, is in alignment with how things work. Because once
Hmm.
again, I have full analogy, the faith part of it. I talk about the mindful athlete, five superpowers, the faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So that the first question we have, according to Einstein, is the most important question we have to answer is whether the universe is friendly or unfriendly. And so I'll cut to the chase. So if it's friendly, that's another way of saying there's a lawfulness to it. And if we align ourselves with principles, with laws or natural laws, then we're going to find harmony. We're going to find ourselves. We're going to be able to understand and to accept things. If we see the universe as unfriendly, then we will use all our resources to deny, destroy, or to dominate the threat.
Hmm.
And so that mindset, there's no way of getting access to prefrontal cortex. That's when you get emotionally hijacked and you go right to the emotion and you do things where there's very little space between stimulus and response. So our reactivity, our habitual way of relating to difficulty or challenges, saying, "Oh, that's bad, that's good," instead of saying it's not good or bad, it just is. But if we see
Hmm.
it as bad, we're in survival mode. We see it as good, we still might be, Pollyannish, or just really not having that balance of saying it's neither good or bad. It's just what it is, but how we relate to it and whether we see it as a roadblock or a stepping stone. That's the internal. That's the inner game.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's all of the above. It's using our whole being, our body, our mind, our heart, and our spirit or soul, and having them in alignment, just like the three brains. The reptilian brain is here, the emotional brain where we get hijacked, and then the prefrontal cortex, which we have the executive functions, and we can actually create space where if we so that that stimulus goes to the executive function, and we can ask, what is this, and how do I want to respond to it, and do I want to respond to it in a principle-centered way? Because the principles, or that friendliness of the universal, the natural laws, there's three things about principles. And so my core values are principles. How I focus on principles, true north principles, and why principles important. Number one, because they're universal. Number two, they're self-evident, but they're what's the other thing I want to say about it? Timeless.
Mm.
They're timeless, universal, and self-evident, which is really important. Why? Because if you can see if it's true or not, if you can assess, then when you're off the beam, you know how to get back on. But if you know what true north is, you'll always know where you are, and you can get back on alignment. And so when I work with elite athletes or anyone, the basic fundamentals. if you master the fundamentals, then whenever you get off track, and you will get off track, you'll be able to find your way to true north.
Hmm. Can you share a time where an athlete that you've worked with was able to lean into acceptance of what they might have otherwise looked at as a failure and how that helped them grow?
Yes, I get a lot of posts, and I talk to athletes all the time, or just people in general, and they tell me how profound these principles have been in their lives. They're able
Hmm.
to turn things around by being able to see that their attitude was important, and that if they can if they can see things, that there's always, even here, it could be paper thin, there's always space between stimulus and response. It might be a little space, but to be able to self-regulate so that you create more space, so you're able to really reflect on things before you do them, in the sense of, okay, if I do this, then this is what's going to happen. Is that what I want? No, then that's not to be done. So there has to be a fair amount of reflection before we do something, so we understand, well, what are we doing, where are we going, and who do we need to be to do what we want to do and to go where we want to go. We have to
Hmm.
understand that. And so if we say, okay, I'm going to try this, and so it's trial and error. This is how we learn. And then when you do something and it doesn't turn out right, then you say, okay, what do I need to learn and practice to be able to execute that? It's so simple, but that's
Hmm.
what I mean. So you reflect before and during the activity. You got to be getting immediate feedback. This what helps us get in the flow, in the zone, is your clear goals, immediate feedback, and an ability to adapt in real time.
Hmm.
So if you're driving, and I live in the Northeast, probably where you are as well, and you get stuck on ice and the car is skidding, you got to turn into the skid where you can get control of it. And so, but you
Hmm.
got to know you're skidding. So this idea of reflecting before, during, and then after, what we call after everything, you ask questions like, what worked, what didn't work, and how do you get what didn't work to work? It's too simple, but that's it. But we don't
Hmm.
reflect. We just do things, and then we focus on, oh, okay, that didn't work. I'm not good, or my, whatever it is. Instead of saying no, let's dissect it. Let's investigate. Let's be curious about what happened. And then when you do something that really works, how do you sustain that? You got to know it. And so
Hmm.
one of the things we do is we don't reflect, and we live in a culture which is based on pathology. What's wrong? People could tell you what's wrong, and they can analyze it down to the lowest common denominator. But they
Hmm.
don't really focus on what's right and how to sustain it. So that's the
Right.
difference. So we got to have that balance between yes and no, or what we perceive as bad and good. And by calling it bad, you put ourselves in survival mode. We create calling it pain or whatever, instead of just being able to create a space or way of relating to it where we're open to just experiencing it, and then letting it flow through, not identifying with it and then getting stuck in it.
Hmm.
Sounds very easy,
In
but it's,
theory,
but it's
sure,
challenging.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the main thing is it's painful, because the
Hmm.
nervous system doesn't, in my mind, my experience is the nervous system does not discriminate. If it's pleasant, approach. If it's unpleasant, avoid. If it's neither pleasant or
Hmm.
unpleasant and we're indifferent, we space out.
Right.
We have to train ourselves to say yes to everything. The pain, the discomfort, like you said, they're playing in the discomfort zone. If you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not growing. You're probably not
Hmm.
expanding who you are and what you can do.
Hmm. Yeah. When you were talking back, I'm just thinking back to what you said about no struggle, no swag, which came up a lot in your book. I love that quote. When you were teaching mindfulness working in prisons, I found that really interesting. Would you mind sharing more on that for listeners?
Yes. So when I started working in prisons, I was working in these substance abuse, but even before that, I was going into the county jails and teaching the folks there about recovery stuff, this idea of being addicted and what that means, and how to relate to your addiction in a way where you can actually de-addict yourself or not continue to fall into to different ways. And so I was sharing my experience, strength, and hope. How did I get clean? How did I deal with my addiction, and how can I transform it where it becomes a stepping stone instead of a roadblock? So I go in and we talk about that. So the real simple thing is, if you want to think about substance abuse, is that if you don't drink or you don't get high, you won't get drunk or high. It's really simple. Is this idea of just really understanding that for me, my addiction was so powerful and so informative because my best thinking kept me stuck. And I actually had to learn how to behave my way into proper thinking instead of thinking my way into proper behavior, because I didn't know about the survival mode and growth mode. I didn't know that the mind and body are one; they're not separate, and that I have four domains of being: physical, we get; the mental, a little bit, not so much; the emotional, social, no, not now. We're catching up to it. Then the spiritual, has to do with purpose, meaning. How do I stay connected? How do I deal with the reality that I'm powerless and I'm all alone?
Mm.
It's very existential.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you answer those riddles? You answer those riddles. Powerless. Once in my experience, especially being a substance abuser, my experience is, once I accepted that I was powerless, I have power.
Mm-hmm.
Once I accepted that I am responsible and I make choices, I have power. And then the idea of being alone, I have to get along beyond this illusion of separateness. I and the other are one. We are all connected. We are all, having a support of a community of people, of being in alignment with views. So working with teams and working with organizations, it's pretty obvious that especially for me, when I stopped playing organized sports, the one thing I missed the most was the camaraderie, the being connected to something greater than yourself
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
having a common purpose. And so you start to see it's through love, it's through relationship that we deal with this idea, this illusion of separateness. And I'm reminded, I'm in Boston here, and I think it was 2013 when we had the marathon bombing. You had people running towards the explosions, not away. At 9/11, you have people running into the building, not away. That's when we get beyond this illusion of separateness, and we're not Democrats or Republicans, male or female, Christian or Jew or Muslim. We are just I and the other one. There's a movement of the heart that says, I have to, yes, this is connection. And
Mm-hmm.
so we don't have to have an explosion to do that. We can understand, once we understand that, that I am other one, and how I relate to you is how I want to be related. When I was in kindergarten, they taught me all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the thing is. How do we get back to the point where we're not making each other things, or things to be controlled? I don't even like the word relationship management, because manage, as Stephen Covey said, you manage things, you lead people. So when you lead somebody, you want to you have to believe in them. You have to, model and inspire and empower them. You have to see their worth and their potential. At least that's what I do. When I see that, you can relate to them based on how they can be, rather than based on how they are. Okay, they're being a pain in the butt, or they're just, they're in distress, and we're relating to them like they're wrong, instead of relating to them based on what they can potentially be, by helping them, seeking to understand, and helping them get unlocked,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And so
Yeah.
being unlocked, and it's not something you do once and you're done, it's moment to moment thing, but we can create habit patterns. We can create ways of being that allow us to be, ha- have the ability to notice when we're locked up, and to be able to unlock.
Mm-hmm. How have you seen that unlocked process happen on the basketball court?
Or basketball court, soccer field, people like keep me on the court, but it's really just being clear about what it is you're doing, and in real time, immediate feedback, and then adapting, adjusting, so that you're in alignment with where you say you're going and who you say you're going to be. So
Mm.
that's why it's an inside job, and it's something that I can't impose on anybody. Just like I make suggestions, but the thing about right effort, making the effort to do what you say you want to do, is that it's individualized. You got to do it. You got to know who you are. That's why you got to know yourself, how you respond to being in survival mode, how you respond to adversity or achievement,
Mhm.
or when you're not doing anything, when nothing is happening. How do you respond to it? Each one of us is unique, and we have something to offer the world, and we can only offer it to our own fulfillment and potentialities. And so
Mhm.
that's why it's important for people to know who they are, so they can be who they are, so they can express who they are, so they can share who they are.
And you talk a lot about knowing who you are and also knowing who you want to be. And
Yes,
it's reminding me of the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, and he talks about that
yes,
casting a vote for the person you wanna be.
yes. That's the first decision in leadership. People don't believe it. There's a book called Unbecoming a Leader by Warren Bennis, and he says to be a leader, you have to be yourself.
Mhm.
And he also says that self knowledge and self invention are lifelong processes. So we have to keep reinventing ourselves and whatnot. And he talked about this idea of the four lessons of self knowledge, and they happen to be you're your own best teacher, which is what I embraced. All these books over 41 years, and just seeking to understand, talking to people like yourself, being asked to share this stuff. Be responsible, no excuses. You can learn anything you want to learn. We some bad mofos. We have a masterpiece. We're wired for
Mhm.
success. And the fourth thing is what we talked about early on. Is true understanding comes from reflecting on experience. So it's easy to reflect on what worked and just be lost in the excitement and the joy of achievement. But we have to reflect on the good, the bad, the ugly, because there's lessons there to
Mhm.
understand, well, how did I do that? And people are always amazed when I say, catch yourself doing something right, your teammate doing something right, or focus on what worked and how did you get it to work, so that you know how to sustain that and to take it to the next level. We don't think
Mhm.
about it that way. So it's really opening up and just being a learner, so you
Mhm.
can understand. So knowing yourself, you gotta be able to observe yourself uncritically, especially when
Yeah.
you're reacting to life. And then you see what the hidden self, the secret self, because we have hideouts. We hide from ourselves. We don't even, it's that, from the in the Bible, when God asked Adam, wherefore art thou? He's not asking him for a physical location. He's asking him, well, I've allotted so many years to your life. What have you done?
Mm.
How are you showing up? And
Mm.
his answer was, I hid myself from you, and by hiding myself from you, I'm also hiding myself from myself. And so that's when you take responsibility and say, I hid myself, then you're able to get out, to actually get out of it. There's a book called The Way of Man by Martin Buber, and he talks about the way of man. He talks about this idea that we have this divine spark that's encrusted in the shell, and everybody is our idea is, how do we, like chrysalis, how do we chip away and release that masterpiece? That's what I call it. Michelangelo, how do you create these masterpieces? He said, all I do is chip away to let the masterpiece express itself. So this
Mhm.
idea of the system of hideouts we have, so the self knowledge of, how do I hide out, how do I stay locked up,
Mhm.
how do I avoid uh, challenges or difficulty,
Mhm.
unpleasantness. So it's getting comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the whole thing right there.
Yeah, it's vulnerable to show up ready to make a mistake, right? To say, yeah, I'm probably gonna fumble at some point, whether it's, in sports or just in life.
We've done that before.
Mhm.
We've done that as little kids. We learn how to walk. We don't stumble. We learn how to hold on. We fall. We get up. And the only time the kid gets really upset if they really hurt themselves, which is very rare. But if they fall and the adult is reacted, oh, that was awful. They start crying, but they
Mhm.
get up and they fall down. They get up and fall down, and they
Mhm.
have this childlike wonder of the world and just getting up every time they fall down. Now, for us, if we tried to do that, this is what you can see what we do when we fall down and get up. We say, "Okay, I'm just going to try this 5 times, and if it doesn't work, the hell with it." We don't have that sense of energizing enthusiasm, just exploring, living in the mystery, just getting up and keep getting up until you can learn how to walk. But that's what it takes. It takes that certain kind of tenacity, that certain
Mhm.
kind of willingness to fall and get up, and knowing that by falling is how we learn. People don't understand. You get on a balancing board and you say, "Oh, I'm off balance," but it's actually being off balance and letting your proprioception system titrate you so that you get into balance.
Mhm. Yeah, giving yourself a chance to stabilize.
That's exactly right.
Mhm.
That's it. But it's having that belief, that self belief that you are amazing. You have everything you need to succeed. But do you have the will? Are you willing to get comfortable being uncomfortable? Are you willing to say yes to the vulnerability? And
Mhm.
I don't know if I could talk about this enough, but one side of the coin is potential freedom. This is going back to Soren Kierkegaard, 1846. One side is freedom, the other side is uncertainty, anxiety. They come together. So
Mhm.
to say that anxiety shouldn't be there is just not real. But it's how you relate to the anxiety. If you use it as a roadblock or a stepping stone, the anxiety can open you up or close you down. But it's
Mhm.
your choice. It's the inner game, how you interpret it. 90% of long-term happiness is predicated on how you see things. So for me, the elite performer, they have positive, they have the Bryant and Bill theory. They have what Sean and Core calls positive genius. They're always, how do you get to the Hall of Fame? HOF, hope, optimism, faith. Then this idea of social support. We have people who we can, giants, we can stand on the shoulders of giants. We can ask people, how do you do this? And you'd say, how do we do this thing? So you have social support. You're not in a vacuum. You're not alone. Once again, that's getting through that myth of being a separate self. And then the third thing is this idea of interpreting a crisis. And this is what I did with the Chicago Bulls in '93 when I first worked with them. When Michael Jordan retired, it's like, okay, so there's a crisis here, but a crisis has two meanings. One meaning is danger. We get that one. But the one we don't get is the opportunity. So if you focus on the opportunity, it's not that you deny, you say, yes, life is difficult. That's a challenge. And by accepting it and understanding it, how do you understand it? By seeking, okay, so there's an opportunity here, and let's investigate that. Let's explore it. So everything I'm saying, I'm not saying take it at face value. I'm saying go see if it's true. You got to have a direct
Mhm.
experience of it. So it becomes embodiment. It doesn't become something that you're in the stratosphere saying, "Oh, that's a good idea." No, you know from your experience that what is being offered is true. You consent to it being true, then it's true. But you can have
Mhm.
a direct experience of it instead of going by what someone told you.
Right.
And that's the power. And that's what it's about. It's about that. Yes. And so when people get that, they get a breakthrough. I feel like all I'm doing is saying, hey, here's some possibilities here. Check it out. And people check it out and say, oh man, it's transforming. This is amazing. Well, yeah, okay. I'm just a channel. I'm just telling you what I experienced. But it's you to do it. You're the
Mhm.
one that gets to do it, but you have to have the will. It's an inside job. You have to say yes to it, embrace it, or as I say, unlock, embrace your greatness. You can learn anything you want to learn. You're your own best teacher. You learn from reflecting on experience. But you have to start with I am responsible. I can't be responsible for what happened to me or what people are doing or what's happening now. But I get to choose the ultimate freedom, unavoidable suffering, saying yes to life, the attitude that I'm having in that situation, how we respond to it. Am I
Mhm.
still responding to it from my will? Me saying, I own this, and this is how I'm choosing to be.
Mhm. That stillness that's required for that contemplation reflection, you're saying even if it's super small? It's reminding me of when you talk about beginner's mind in your book
That's right.
and drawing back.
Beginner's mind is seeing things in new and fresh ways. And the interesting thing is that we're talking about novelty, and guess what? Novelty is a flow trigger. Seeing things in new and fresh ways. That's the important thing because what happens is we in the perceptual system, what we do is we have a catalog or we have our own Google that just stores all this information. And then when we experience something, we respond, react to it based on what we already know. And the idea of true understanding and true learning comes from the don't know mind. The beginner's mind is just because if you're a beginner, it's like this is empty. If you're expert, it's full. There's nothing gets in. So you're just, seeing things based on your past experience. You're living in the default future. But the idea is things are changing. There's a flow to life. You can't step in the same river twice. And even if you could, you're not the same person that you step in because after so many days, the cells in our body die and they'll get reborn. So everything is in flux, everything is changing, everything's impermanent.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand that. Okay, how does that affect us? And
Mm-hmm.
so by having a beginner's mind and seeing things in new and fresh ways, there's a potential like the little kid learning how to walk. She she doesn't know what's going on. She's just exploring. And so we had to do that. Don't know mind. Let's look at this in new and fresh ways. And you have to do that because things are changing. And often I encounter if I go to check out in a grocery store, or whatnot. Sometimes, I can use my eyes, I can use my palm. It's just all these different ways I use my credit card, and they keep changing. And so, if we've identified or attached to the way things used to be, then we're not present,
Mm-hmm.
relating to things on the through the default filter. So, I see you as I know you from the past. So when you change, I can't accept or embrace the new things that you do because I got you. It's like the virtual map in the brain is, how we relate to things. So you probably heard of phantom limb syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when somebody, like, say, they have a part of the body removed, like the arm or leg or something, but yet they have pain in that limb. So how is that possible? Well, it's possible because we have a virtual map, body schema, I think they call it, a virtual map is relating to experience based on the old map. So we actually have to go in and change the map. So if we keep seeing ourselves as a victim or seeing ourselves as a 13-year-old uh, young lady who has braces and doesn't look, we're relating to ourselves as that old self and not who we are now. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
keep revising that map. And the way we revise it is by seeing ourselves in new and different ways, but just being open to seeing things new and fresh ways. And it gets us flow ready. It gets us into that flow or that idea of embracing your greatness, find the flow, and then discovering success. So this idea of beginner's mind is so huge. Just be able to see things in new and fresh ways. And there's something about coming out of that stillness where there's a creativity and a wisdom that goes beyond human resource, beyond what we could do. We can't program an AI that can do that
Yeah.
with
Yeah. That's a good
empathy.
point. Well, and that's what this is all about, and that's what my work is all about, is helping people surrender the way they typically look at life to step out of comfort into growth. That's the slogan of my psychotherapy practice as well, to just keep on surrendering, keep on letting go so that you can make room for more.
So do people get how do they respond when you tell them they have to surrender or they have to give up something?
Usually with hesitancy, with some fear. There's a desire to want to experience the growth, but as you've talked about, also a desire to avoid the suffering that might, be required to get there.
Yeah. So how do you get them to say yes to what's uncomfortable? What's the condition for their readiness? My
Mm,
friend Tex Winters, Hall of Fame basketball coach, he called it the readiness principle.
mm,
People have to be ready. As you can offer a lesson, but if they're not ready, they won't consent to it being a possibility.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think when I first started my work, I felt a desire to convince and to, sell people on this idea of it feels so good to experience, as you're talking about, curiosity, learning new things, that like dopamine, that high almost that you can get from growing. And now I use something by Gabor Mate, physician and now psychotherapist as well, called compassionate inquiry. And that's where you're giving space for the client to explore their own mind without any agenda. You mentioned that before. Like I can't have any agenda as a
Mhm.
therapist. I
Yeah.
have to I have to be totally, it's your decision. If you want to grow, grow and I'm here. And if you don't, that's also your prerogative. And through compassionate inquiry, you're helping the client tune into parts of themselves, as you described, that they're hiding from,
So yeah, it sounds a little bit like internal family systems also.
which I also love.
Okay. All right. So then compassionate, but how do you explain compassion to them? What's compassionate and that what they're doing is compassionate? How do you explain that to them? Or how is that, how do you get them to understand? Like when I hear compassionate inquiry, what does that mean? That means what's it going to take? How do you get them? Because it's going to be uncomfortable.
Mhm.
How do you get them? How do you make them ready, or how do you create the possibility for them to embrace that? You see what I'm doing here? About how do you do your own compassionate inquiry about compassionate inquiry?
It's very meta at this stage, and it's good because this is challenging me right now. How do I challenge or get them to feel comfortable engaging in that compassionate inquiry? And I'm really thinking about it, and it's always spontaneous. It's always spontaneous. They always stumble upon compassion by tuning into younger parts of themselves and having this realization that they feel bad for these parts of themselves that think they're not worthy, think they're not good enough, have all these limiting beliefs. And there's usually tears, and
Yeah.
that's that spontaneous compassion. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yes, I talk about it and Unlocked, I believe, also, but in the Mindful Athlete, that's when I introduced this idea of the AOF method of motivation. AOF method of motivation is ass on fire. In recovery, talk about the gift of desperation.
Mm,
Talk about that with me. I tried everything and I was ready to surrender. And when I say surrender, it's not surrendering, my power. It's more about surrendering ideas or beliefs or things that are getting in the way. We call them hindrances. It could be my surrender, letting go of my fear, my strong desire, or trying wanting it too badly, for having low energy or having apathy, the worry, restlessness, the doubt. That those we call hindrances, and they hinder our ability to unlock, but they hinder our ability to see clearly and to be in the moment. And so this idea of understanding what gets in the way. And of course, Marcus Aurelius famously said, what's in the way becomes the way.
hmm.
And so it's this inquiry, this openness of just saying it. So when you think about compassionate inquiry, who's getting the compassion? What's the compassion? And I understand what you're saying is people when they can. I'm just going by what you said, and of course my experience also. You're saying by opening up and, or as I like to say in the Wizard of Oz, being total and pulling back the curtain so you see who's like the things that there's a piece or there's a openness, there's an unlocking that allows people to get into this compassionate inquiry.
Mhm.
Because being compassionate is saying yes to the good, the bad, the ugly. Is the acceptance of this is what's here, and let's say yes to it. Let's consent to it being true, and then we can do something about it.
Mhm.
As I call it, the four A's. The awareness. That's a mirror mind, and then the acceptance. That's the challenging part. Saying yes to it and accepting it, and you can go through a grief process. You go through that. The bargaining, the denial, the anger, the depression, the acceptance, whatever. And it's
Mhm.
not linear. It can go back and forth. But the awareness. the acceptance, and then the compassionate action, which is kind of interesting, is what you're talking calling compassionate inquiry. Compassion.
Hmm.
How do I unlock? How do I have compassionate? How can I? What's the compassionate thing to do? And people don't realize the compassionate thing to do oftentimes is embracing the unpleasantness,
Hmm.
or getting to the point where you say, there was a movie years ago called Network, and he said people, they're upset. You go to your window and say, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore."
I remember that.
See what we're coming around to, but this compassionate inquiry is this idea of saying yes to life, saying yes to yourself, and by saying yes to yourself, you're saying yes to others. So for me, it's easier for me to say yes to others than it is, well, it's been my conditioning to say yes to others than to say yes to myself. So let me give you an example. I was trying to write my first book that came out 10 years ago, The Mindful Athlete: Secrets to Pure Performance. And I couldn't, and a friend of mine worked for Parallax Press. He'd been trying to get me for a year to write a book about athletic competition and mindfulness. And I just kept saying, well, there's all these books out there, Tinahan and all of these amazing people. What? Why do people don't want to hear from me? I don't have anything to say. And
Mm.
it wasn't until I found that writing the book is going to help others. And so is what I call my Georgism: forget yourself in service to find yourself. So,
Mm.
and I learned this in 12 steps. So when I say, oh, it can help others, it's also helping me. So that's what I mean about knowing who you are and how you need to relate to things. And so knowing that about myself, that I can't do it initially, but when I can see I'm doing it for others, I'm actually doing it for myself. So I call it forget yourself to find yourself, forget yourself in service. And that's when you show up. That's when you find
Hmm.
yourself.
And I was going to ask you about that service component. So I love that you brought that up. I'm familiar with the AA model, which I know that's something that you went through in your recovery. I have family members that have also gone through that program. So I've learned a bit about it through them. And service seems to be one that is absolutely integral to their recovery and to remaining on that path
Yes.
and wanting to continue growing.
Yes, we have. Like, people may be aware that I work with Phil Jackson and his teams, and they have the triangle offense. And the thing people don't understand is I've studied Tai Chi martial arts for a long time, and a triangle is, you have the pyramids and whatnot. So in my fifth 5-year medallion, it has the base is recovery, on the left is unity, and on the right is service. So this service is a big part of it. And if you go back into the Buddhist texts and the Bodhisattva idea, what is that? That means I am awakened for the release of suffering of all beings. So the Bodhisattva ideal is you're doing it for all beings, not just for yourself. And so this idea of service, it goes back in many traditions, the Good Samaritan in the Bible. There's many different, in the Quran, and I'm sure there's some things as well. This idea of being beyond the illusion of self. It's like I and the other are one.
Mhm. How would you encourage others, or how have you encouraged others to deepen their own growth through service to unlock their potential?
That's interesting because, yes, because I feel I help people get connected with the need to be connected to something greater than yourself.
Mhm.
And so you can do that in community, or you can do it where there's something about giving that actually, whatever you give comes back to you. So just encouraging them to identify with how do you deal with this one of the biggest health issues we have in this country, probably in the world, is people feeling not connected or alone or alienated. So it comes down to this idea of how do you connect. How do you connect? But first, you got to connect with yourself, your whole self. So it's like a microcosm. Your mind, body, heart, and soul. You have to align that so you're fully integrated. And you talked about it. It's by integrating those parts of ourselves that Robert Bly talked about it as the black bag we drag behind us, all the things that we repress because the shadow or the things we don't want to know. It's only by the light saying yes to things that we're able to just move through them. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what it comes down to is just, usually, well, my friend calls me fresh, but I think I'm a wise guy, and not in a wise guy, like like I'll say, well, how's that stuff working for you? But I use other language like it, but without how's that it working for you? Or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so are is your ass on fire enough to really try something else? Because that's what I had to do. It's like, yeah, maybe you don't have enough pain. Okay, go get some more, get some more, get some more until you get to the point where you say, okay, I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, so it's an individual thing. But here's what I discover as I progress in this process is people will ask me how am I going to do things, and I say I have no idea what I'm going to do. And some people get nervous about that. But what I'm really saying is I have all this experience and it's great, but I don't want to have paradigm blindness by having uh, a concept. And this is what I teach people when you're like if you had a great performance, if you're a violinist or playing the keyboards or whatever. And the tendency is to try to replicate it instead of realizing the reason you had it is because you had no agenda and you just showed up and you saw what, and you were spontaneous. That's what being in flow is, to be of one's own will, but being able to see things in clear ways, clear goals, immediate feedback, and this going with the flow of what's happening is like
Mm-hmm.
improv. And then you get yourself into flow. You embrace your greatness, your ability to just say, I don't know. I have beginner's mind. I'm just going to go with it. But I know what my intention is, and I know I'm here to serve, and I'm willing to be uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
being, getting comfortable being uncomfortable and not knowing. Don't know mine. So it's kind of a Zen koan. And by
Mm-hmm.
doing that, you start to have this continuous inquiry where you're asking, oh, this is what it's like to just be still and know, or to be still until you know. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
this idea of, yeah, it takes tremendous faith to be able to allow the unknown unfolding moment to unfold because we don't know what the future holds. We don't know that. Then going back to Kierkegaard, when I talked about one side of the coin is freedom, the other side is anxiety, uncertainty, and he called it the alarming possibility of being able. The alarming possibility of being able. So some of so what we dealing with is we're afraid of our greatness. We don't want to embrace it because we don't. That's not, it's not okay because people will attack you. This is the thing about it when people, there's a lot of haters out there that don't like the light. So
Mm-hmm.
it takes tremendous courage to be the light, even though you're going to get attacked. And everybody's been attacked. Doesn't matter who you are. Jesus got crucified. The Buddha got stoned. Martin Luther and John Gandhi, they all got shot. There's a lot of people out there that are willing to do it in spite of the fact that they could lose their lives, but they know it's for the greatest good. So we do it on some level every day. You got to die of your old self to be reborn in your new self. But this alarming possibility of being able, anxiety, once you accept and understand anxiety is no longer a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's the anxiety that we avoid that turns into neurosis and psychosis. But it's by being able to say, "Oh, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. That means I'm out of my comfort zone. Cool, that's fine." Or I'm feeling anxious. Or man, no, that's just excitement because you care about what's going to happen, and you're looking forward to achievement, to actually showing up.
Yeah.
So you can see where the self-regulation is really important. Self-regulated thoughts, feelings, behaviors, how we interpret things. So with the self-awareness of this uncritical mirror mind, self-regulation, we get the self-mastery. So self-mastery is another way of saying strong self-efficacy belief, which means that no matter what happens, we get to choose how we respond to it. And even
Mm-hmm.
when we react without the choice, we can reflect on it and learn and grow what we need to learn and practice so that we can actually do it. But
Mm-hmm.
you didn't learn how to walk overnight. So you're gonna fall, you're gonna get up. So mistakes are opportunities. That's an interpretation. Once again, oh, this is an opportunity, not oh, it's a reflection that I'm not good enough or whatever. No, it just means there's an opportunity here for you to do this. And so this compassionate inquiry. Well, how do I do this? With compassion, caring about myself and being sensitive to the fact that it hurts
Yeah.
and that it requires courage, because courage
Mhm.
means there's no fear. It means you do it in spite of the fear because you're worth it.
I love that, doing it in spite of the fear rather than trying to avoid the fear, embracing it, acknowledging that it's there, acknowledging that it can be hard, and
Yes,
knowing that without doing that, there won't be growth.
that's exactly right. So that's the thing. I am so happy that you are doing what you're doing and being how you're being, and just being able to share the compassionate inquiry
Thank you.
with us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You talk about pure performance versus peak performance. Those chapters in your book really, really stood out to me. Can you
Mhm.
share to listeners what the difference between those two concepts are?
It depends on the person and how they're interpreting it, but the idea of peak, just the idea of peaking. I think people get confused with having a peak experience that Maslow talked about and peak performance. Because in my mind, there's no peak. Right? There's it's just a level, but then there's always another level. There's always another level. So the challenge with peak performance is saying, okay, I peaked, and you're saying, okay, I'm done. I can't do anymore. Whereas pure performance is to do it for no reason and just to honestly express yourself and to not limit yourself to what you already did. But
Mhm.
that it's pure performance is like you're not. Joseph Campbell talked about in The Power of Myth when he said you're not compelled by desire or fear. You're centered. The idea is to be in the moment and to honestly express yourself, and then keep continue to expand or to extend yourself. And so pure performance is you're performing for the activity in and of itself. The guy Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi that wrote the book The Flow, and he's considered the father of flow and whatnot. He talks about being the autotelic personality. That
Mm.
means to do the activity for no reason other than the enjoyment of the moment and doing the activity in and of itself. The activity is the goal,
Mhm.
not the outcome, because we get in the challenge when we're focused on the outcome and not focused on the process. So the idea is, yeah, we see the mountain, but we're not focused on the mountain because we'll trip over the moment. The idea is to see the mountain, but at the same time, just the 1,000-mile trip starts with the first step, one step, the next step. So that's the challenge, because if we don't do that, we're focused on how we're doing, and if you're focused on how you're doing, you're not focused on what you're doing.
Mhm.
So this idea of talking about it and content, there's no peak, is limitless. There's no limit to the next level we can go to, whether the next level being fully engaged, fully mindful. The joy we have now, there's another level.
Mhm.
The sadness we have now, oh, there's another level. But can we relate to that sadness in a way where we have that self-efficacy belief that we can respond to the sadness as accepting it, saying yes to it, and then coming up with compassionate action, and then
Mhm.
the assessment afterwards. So I talk about the four A's: awareness, acceptance, compassionate action, and assessment. What worked, what didn't work. So that's the process of getting beyond the limits. Because what we say is the limit, but it's like in the Jewish tradition, they call it Hashem. They don't talk about God because they know if they have a word about God, then that's limiting the potential. The Tao, if you can name the Tao, is no longer the Tao. The Tao, they pronounce it Tao, but it's the Tao. So
Mm.
it's the same thing. It's like, how can you explain something that's unexplainable? You can't. You can point to it, but you can't name it, because if you name it, it's limiting what it can do.
Yeah. And I remember in your book when you talk about that flow and being in that kind of like nameless intuition and trusting
Yeah, you're
yourself that
not
you
there.
watch. Yeah.
You're not there. I live in flow a lot. And sometimes people say, "Oh, remember when you told me this?" or that? I said, "Not really." I record everything because I wrote my book. I read my book. I wrote it, and I read my book over 60 times. The Mind for Athlete Unlocked, not quite as long, but at least probably 10, 20 times. And every time I read it, I say, "Oh, that's some good stuff. Where'd that come from?" Because you're not there. It's just a flow. When you're in
Yeah,
flow, it's just happening. And if you're retaining things, then you're not in flow.
right.
So so it's giving myself permission to be spontaneous, and then with AI and everything, just to record it and to learn from it. But in the moment, you're being spontaneous. Whatever is there is there. You don't have preconceived notions. You have beginner's
Hmm.
mind.
Exactly.
Once again, novelty is a flow trigger. Complexity is another one.
Hmm.
Uncertainty is another one. Just to name a few. So this compassionate inquiry makes you flow ready.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, George, for everything that you do. I'm so grateful to have had you on here today and to hear all the wisdom you've had to share with us.
Well, you're welcome. Is there anything I can do to help you? You just let me know.
That would
That
be
I like
amazing.
to keep an eye on what you're doing and how you're helping people. But this has been awesome. I don't want to stop.
I know, right? It's a great conversation.
Yeah. So remember, you're a bad mofo. There's
You
only
too,
one of
of course.
you. There's there never will be another. Never was and never will be. And what you offer the world is through your own achievement and potentiality. That's it. There's no peak. But you're performing not to get to the peak. You're performing because you're just doing the thing for the activity in and of itself. But by doing that, you keep raising what you consider the peak. So we all have that. And like I said, you're a bad mofo and you're unique. All of us are unique. We got to embrace that. Greatness, find the flow, discover success. That's how you unlock. And it's not a one-time thing. It's a continuity. It's a continuous thing. So I call it
Mhm.
continuous inquiry.
Mm.
And okay, but you're not trying to get there, but by being engaged in doing the activity for no reason in and of itself, it actually takes you to the next level without trying to get to the next level. It's kind of it's a conundrum, but it's really important because the more you try to get in flow, the more you won't. But if you just understand the conditions for flow and just do the thing for the activity in and of itself for no reason, with no agenda, other than to honestly express yourself and to be of service, as they say, that's dope. That's the bomb.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the podcast, I invite you to participate in a growth zone challenge. I invite you to take a moment, a second, a gap in your day right now and share this episode with 2 other people. Thank you for minding the gaps with me. I'll see you next time on the journey out of our comfort zones and into our growth zones.